Lunch with Claibs and Joe on claibsonline.com.
And welcome on in. Good afternoon to you. I am Joe Roderick. This is Claibs Online Lunch with Claibs and Joe on June 15th, a Monday, and we welcome in Mike Claiborne to the mix. What's going on, Claibs? How you doing?
It's all good. I'm ready to get this week off on the right foot. Maybe we'll have some good news at some point. So I'm just looking forward to that, man. It looks like we're getting closer to playing some games. We had some really good golf over the weekend, and baseball is where it was yesterday.
And the day before and the month before.
The day before that. Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. I know they're meeting as we speak. Trying to figure out the next step, at least the baseball MLB is. The players have basically said there's no reason to talk anymore. Let's just get this over with. I think there's an underlying issue here where I think they want to really back the owners into an unfair labor negotiations and maybe file a grievance. I don't know if a grievance is going to help anybody here, because if you stretch it out and prolong it, we're going to be back in the same spot. But I think everything else, Joe, is this is a precursor to what 2022 is going to look like. So if anybody's a big baseball fan, at the rate we're going, I don't know if we're going to have a 2022 baseball season.
Yeah, it's something that we'll end up getting to here in just a few minutes here on Lunch with Claibs and Joe. We're powered by Ameren, Illinois, and driven by Mungenast Alton Toyota this week. More on that in just a bit. Lots going on the website. You had quite a few interviews last week, and one of those will get into a topic here that we'll start with. Also on my show this past weekend, had Bob Carpenter, John Kelly, and Earl Austin Jr. all on the show this past Saturday. All of that is available up on claibsonline.com as well. I talked to Earl about his basketball game, Mike. I brought it up with him, and I think there was a challenge at the end of the interview between he threw one out to you to get back on the court with you here soon. So
okay. Yeah. Well, considering neither one of us has probably played in a while, it could be an unfair advantage.
For the fans watching, yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's true too. But I guess he wants to play one-on-one, because if we were playing his team against mine, then he would basically prove my point of not passing the ball. So I don't know how this is going to work, but we'll figure it out.
So last we saw you, most people that are watching this saw you last night, because the 30 for 30 on the 1998 home run chase Long Gone Summer featured you along with many of your friends as well in the media. I saw Bernie on there. I saw Rick Hummel. I saw Mike Shannon, Jen Langosh. They were all included there. If you want to just look at the St. Louis folk that were a part of that show, but they did have a lot of commentary from a lot of people. You saw it last night, the first time that you saw the finished product of that show, Long Gone Summer. What were your thoughts on the final product?
Well, I was happy to be part of it. It brought back a lot of fun memories. Obviously things happened after that. But Joe, I'll tell you, listening to Mike Shannon and Jack Buck on some of those calls, just that's when those guys were just, I don't know anybody else who would have done a better job than what they were able to do. So I think I got a kick out of listening to those two work together, and I listen to Mike and John, and they have as much fun. And there's going to be a day where we're going to be talking about some of the games they're involved in or they were involved in. But listening to Mike and Jack was a lot of fun. And then just thinking about all the things that were going on with McGwire and Sosa at the time, it was a lot of fun. I was happy to be part of it.
What was your role in the media back in '98, and what kind of access did you personally have to Mark McGwire?
I was a program director at KFNS.
Okay.
And, so I was there virtually every day for one reason or another. And McGwire, he was like two different people. Really three different people. He was moody, but he understood he had a job to do as far as talking to the masses of media. And when you deal with him now, or if you encounter him, he is quite engaging. And I never really had a problem with him, though. but I know that it started to wear on him a little bit with regard to how this whole thing was unfolding. Because, one of the things about records of this nature, I think the guys physically can do it, but I think mentally it just takes a toll on you because of the pressure. But he was, he did the best he could with what he had to work with. I mean, remember, there was no social media of the level that it is now. And I think he wore tired of maybe the same questions. And maybe if he didn't give you the answer you wanted, you would redirect it in another manner. But he was fine. I mean, considering the circumstances, remember, even when you think about how the media covered that, we've never covered anything like that before. And just the way the Cardinals were trying to maintain some sort of transparency as well, it was a little bit of a challenge, but we got through it, and it was fun when you look back on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you compare the 30 for 30 that we saw yesterday, and you compare it to what we saw a few months ago with The Last Dance, and when you bring up that it was the same questions every night, that's similar to what Jordan was dealing with too. That every single night it was, "Are you going to retire? Are you going to retire? Are you going to retire?" And I mean, you hear all these stories, and Bob Carpenter told a story on my show that the KPLR news director there, his boss, just kept telling him every day, "Hey, you need to get an interview with McGuire. You need to get an interview with McGuire," to the point where Bob knew that he was bothering McGuire, asking him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he had to do it because his boss was telling him. And that's what it is in a lot of these cases. It's easy to tell somebody, "Hey, go ask him this every day. Go ask him, go ask him." But if you're the person that has to ask him that at a certain point, you feel bad because you're pissing off the player.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's amazing when we have these sort of moments. There's always a guy in a newsroom who has very little experience in sports. They want you to go out and make it rain every day. And, some days it just isn't a story there. But I understand people want whatever you say, whatever they want to hear. People can't get enough of it. But when you're the messenger every day, that can kind of put a toll on a relationship if you don't have a guy who understands that that's your job and he'd rather not do it. And I'll give you a good example. For me, I have access to the clubhouse every day. But that doesn't mean I'm in there every day talking to guys when I don't have anything to talk to them about. And that's one of the things, and you've been in the clubhouse before, you've seen how guys just stand around like they're waiting on something to happen, and 90% of the time nothing happens. But you're there and they want you to come back with something. In Mark's case, man, I never seen anything like it. I mean, we've seen teams that were playing well, but you never saw the same thing every day, and every day the numbers got bigger. So it was interesting.
What was it like being in the ballpark during the game every day? We've all been there when you are in the midst of a pennant race and the 2 or 3 scores that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But in a race like that, Sosa's coming up at every 45 minutes, every hour, and you don't have smartphones like you do now. You can't sit there on the MLB app and see when he's due up. There's some people maybe listening on their radios that they brought with them, or a lot of it's just kind of the whisper game of finding out what's happening. So what's it like following Sammy Sosa while you're watching Mark McGuire?
Well, I'm going to tell you, one of the things that I always remembered was the hush in the crowd. When he got in the batter's box, you could hear a pin drop. Nobody wanted to miss it. This is when camera phones all had the light, the strobe light to the camera phones, and everybody was taking a picture of it at bat. And you could be sitting 1,000 feet away, and you still, hey, that's me right there. You'd be showing somebody your camera. And I've always been amused and you've seen people like they take videos of meaningless things, and I'm like, dude, why? But in that case, it was huge. But I just remember how everything just shut down. Nobody said a word until he got out of the batter's box.
Man, I remember just watching those games every year. I think I was in 7th grade, 7th or 8th grade in 98. Yeah, 7th grade in 98, watching those and getting to just knowing what it was then. You bring up Jack Buck. I'm interested in knowing, because they did touch a little bit on the steroids afterwards. They touched on the PEDs, and we saw the emotion that Jack Buck had when the record was broken. What would his reaction have been like once the revelations of all the PEDs came out afterwards?
That's a great question. I think he obviously would be disappointed, like everybody else was. But what can you do about it at this point or then? I don't think he would have scorned him or put him on the bad guy list or anything like that, because Mark was genuinely a good person. But I think when you look at how this whole thing unfolded, you probably would be disappointed that you were part of it, but you didn't know, how severe this thing was going to be. I had a conversation with someone earlier about the fact that not that you were making an excuse for the guy, because he did come clean. Now, granted, it took some prodding and some other things to take place for him to acknowledge what he did. But I'm not sure if a lot of those guys were truly aware of what they were doing. The Andro was something that was kind of like a borderline drug anyway, for supplement for people on whether they should be using it or not, and they eventually banned it. But when you look back then, everybody was trying something to get an edge. Now, in McGuire's case, he was using it because it gave him a quicker recovery time. At least that's how he felt. And Joe, you're a trainer. You know how this works. Sometimes it's more mental in what things that you ingest in your body, and you think it makes you feel stronger or faster or whatever. And I think psychologically, he started to believe it. I know Tony La Russa used to believe it because he thought, there's nothing wrong here. But at the end, it was just illegal by the light of what the MLB had passed down as far as the rules were concerned. So,
yeah, and to add on to that, there were a lot of players that were doing it as well, and they touched on that with Sosa, and they kind of pressed Sammy on that. I thought it was weird too. I think it took 23 minutes into the documentary for Sammy Sosa to be shown for the first time. That struck me as odd. I get that he finished second in the race. I get that the director of it is a Metro East St. Louis area guy. And Mark McGwire finished out on top. But I would have liked to see Sosa kind of introduced into that a lot earlier and maybe seen a lot more than what he was.
That's a good point you make. I think a couple of things come into play here. We don't know how reluctant Sammy was in doing this. Don't know how much real footage he wanted to have as far as video is concerned. There's a lot of things that may have gone into it. And I think that for a lot of people, Sammy Sosa might have been more of a one-hit wonder. Now, granted, he had 3 years and he had 50 home runs, but leading up to that, there was no real indication that he was a guy that was going to hit for that sort of power. The most he ever hit was like 30-something in a year. And then all of a sudden he shows that he hit 68. Okay. I just think that there were a lot of, question marks about how he progressed so quickly. I think the local flavor had a lot to do with it too. Now, on the other side of that coin, Cubs ended up getting in the playoffs that year.
Yeah.
The only thing the Cardinals had to follow was the McGwire run. And, that was a decent team. They didn't have enough pitching. And that's what cost them. But it was an interesting time to be a Cardinal fan and certainly following McGwire. And I just really think the reason why you saw more of McGwire was because I think that there was more familiarity with this situation. And the fact that McGwire was the one who came clean, and Sammy, he doesn't know anything. He didn't even know how to speak English at the congressional hearing.
I thought it was interesting how some of these documentaries, they will bring up memories or kind of reintroduce some things that have happened since then. With The Last Dance, I think a lot of people might have learned about Karl Malone's backstory while watching that those final 2 episodes of that. And I think one of the things I realized that for some reason just never occurred to me is that the Cubs have never welcomed Sammy Sosa back since he left.
Right.
And there is a lot of I don't know if it's bad blood or if they just don't want to reintroduce that, but with everything else that the Cubs have kind of shaken off since winning that World Series, it is surprising. I don't know and I don't know who needs to step up first or how that needs to be done, but it is odd that Sammy Sosa has never been back to Wrigley since then.
Well, I think you have to take this into account. That was a different ownership group. The Ricketts family didn't own the Cubs then.
Right.
And I think that may have had something to do with it. I think the fact that most people, well, I'm not going to say most people, I think that, it's been kind of a facade or kind of a joke that, Sammy Sosa has not acknowledged anything. Now, granted, he may say, I didn't do anything, but I just think there's too much to say. I don't know. Who steps up first? Sammy's all but begged to come back. So this is more of a Cub thing. And I don't know if the Cubs are going to react just because Sammy wants to come back and a couple of talk shows think it's a good idea. There might be underlying issues to this on when they think it's an opportune time for him to be part of the Cub lore. So I think we'll just have to wait and see on that.
And meanwhile, the Cardinals not only hired Mark McGwire to be a hitting coach, but in 2017, they inducted him into the Team Hall of Fame. So it's a completely different way that McGwire is viewed in St. Louis as Sosa is in Chicago.
Yeah, and again, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that McGwire had a champion in Tony La Russa, and he came clean. With two reasons on why he had a chance to get a second chance. I don't know if Sammy had anybody with it. Again, different ownerships, different front offices. There was no consistent champion for him. Tony is still as much a part of Cardinal baseball, even though he's worked with two other teams since he's left. He will always remember and respect him here compared to who was Jim Riggleman was the manager, I guess, when the Cubs were winning.
I had to look it up too before this started. Yeah, I had no idea who would have been managing the Cubs then.
And Jim Riggleman is a bench coach now in Cincinnati. So I think that just the overall presence of someone who can champion his cause, it doesn't exist in Chicago.
Yeah, it's again, it was fun to watch all the home runs. I completely forgot how close Griffey was there as well that year. I know he finished well behind in third place, but for Griffey to have the year that he did that year too. And there was one other part I really liked, and it was when they kind of showed Bonds in one of the games. How small he was. And it reminded me of a part in a movie where there's just that foreshadowing where you see Barry Bonds watching these guys hit these home runs, and then they show him, and you just kind of, maybe then in his mind, he's thinking, you know what? I can do that too. I can go do what they're doing, and I can do it better.
And he did.
Yeah. So I thought I enjoyed it. It's not going to get the national recognition that we saw The Last Dance get, but The Last Dance, I mean, you're talking a 10-part or a 5-weekend series that was drawn out from. This was totally different, but I think many St. Louis fans enjoyed what they got to see last night.
Yeah, I think baseball fans did too, to a point. And again, I give AJ credit for just focusing on the season. And he did touch, as you mentioned, on what happened after that. But I just think they wanted to relive the moment for what they knew at that time.
Yeah. I want to make sure that people know that you can comment along, whether it is on Twitter or on Facebook. You can make your comments, and some of those, if we feel like putting them up, we can. And Claibs, our good friend Polo Asensio, is watching, and he commented that Jim Riggleman did say yesterday that he thinks that Sammy should be invited back to Wrigley Field at some point. And hopefully, as I transition from Polo over to this yesterday, Claibs, it's kind of like your national holiday here in St. Louis. It was Flag Day, and it's what people associate you with here in town. And it had to be the saddest Flag Day that you've been a part of in your career here in St. Louis.
Yeah. Oh, I got one other thing to say to Polo.
Yes.
Boo! He knows what I'm talking about. Wait. And for people who don't know what Flag Day means, other than the real meaning of it, honoring the flag, I've always felt like June 14th is the true barometer of what sort of baseball team you have. When you start in April, you've gone through hot streaks, cold streaks, good weather, bad weather. You've had an injury or two. You've had some people live up to the expectation. You've had people exceed it. You've also had people that have disappointed you because they've gotten off to a slow start or whatever the case may be. And then there's always one intangible that comes along that you didn't anticipate, and how you deal with that comes about. And by June 14th, you know what your team looks like. Then it's up to you or management or whomever to say, all right, this is what we're going to need down the road. We have too much of this, not enough of that. But by June 14th, you have a pretty good feel for what your ball club looks like. And that's why we call it Flag Day, because obviously it's June 14th, but that's the baseball reason on why we call it Flag Day.
And yesterday, obviously, everybody's still sitting at 0-0 as the season has yet to begin. Your thoughts on the latest owner's proposal that was sent? I guess it was Friday night when that was sent over, and the players pretty much just said, "Nope, not happening," immediately as they received it.
Well, obviously, I'm disappointed that they can't find some middle ground here. Both sides have a point, and that's what makes this interesting, where we know where they stand, and there's middle ground between these two that neither wants to go to. And now they're going to try and make the other guy look bad. Nobody's going to win this. Nobody wins a nuclear war. And I think the players have tried to force the owner's hand, and the owners are basically said, well, we're just going to play and forget about it. We'll just see you later. Can they fix it? Yeah, I think they can. And again, Joe, we talked about this the last couple of weeks. I think one way to solve the money issue is agree to defer the money. Say we'll pay you in 4 years or 3 years. Now, somebody's going to say with interest, or you can figure that out. But I think if they do it that route, because it's going to take baseball at least 2 years, maybe 3, to get healthy financially. And then after that, and you're getting a new TV deal too, by the way. And by then, you would have enough put away where those people, those players, and the money that they're lost or they're losing, they'd have a chance to recoup a majority of that in 3 or 4 years. And you know what? The thing is, a lot of these guys that are arguing about it won't even be in the league in 3 or 4 years. But I tell you this, they'd certainly like to see a nice, healthy check one more time, 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years down the road. And I'm just a little surprised we haven't heard more about deferred money. We've seen before with players. Players have gotten, there's been plenty of players that have gotten deferred money in their contracts. I don't know why this seems to be a sticking point.
Yeah, we wait. They had, I guess I'm looking here as far as what we're seeing 30 minutes ago. Bob Nightingale tweeted out, the conference call with owners has ended. The two sides still have to negotiate safety and health protocols before a determination is made on the length of the season. So that is where we stand after the phone call this morning. It doesn't sound like if that's not been covered, if that's something that hasn't been figured out, it doesn't sound like we're anywhere closer to getting games going by, I think, what a lot of people were hoping was 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, that's gone by the wayside because you're going to need at least 3 weeks to get ready. So I think if you can agree to something this week, we're talking mid-July, that you can actually get on the field and play. But we don't know how far along they are with any of this now. We thought they had a lot of the issues resolved, but apparently they don't. And I think that's going to change on a daily basis, Joe, because we're learning more and more about how this virus works, and there is no pattern to it. I think we've learned that. The numbers are starting to go up again, and guys are like coming up with it, turning positive, and maybe they haven't even been exposed to people, in the manner that we would assume. So baseball is going to isolate themselves one way or the other.
Yeah, 24 states, I believe, as of this past weekend, they've seen the numbers rise recently. So it is that we're starting to see possibly that second wave coming through. The before we move away from baseball, the draft was also last week. The only 5 rounds though this year, as they with minor league baseball kind of up in the air. You're not going to add on 40 new players, and you're not going to go about it the way they used to. The Cardinals made their picks. I was on the call with the gentleman that was picked first in their first round. I was on the Zoom press conference that they had afterwards. A young kid, that high schooler, third baseman, 6'5", 220, Claibs, and he's going to skip going to Duke to sign with the Cardinals. So it looks like a big kid that they have another power bat in the farm system.
So he said he's going to sign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've talked to somebody who's familiar with him and says he's a really good athlete and can do a lot of things. Doesn't know if third base will be his home. You don't see many 6'5" third basemen around. Chris Bryant maybe, but other than that, you don't see a lot of guys of that size. But they say he can swing it. And that Georgia, the state of Georgia has turned out a lot of good players. So it's not like he's playing against somebody from Montana. All right. I mean, there's some really good programs in the state of Georgia. So, but he's a 4-year project. Maybe, if anybody thinks this guy's going to show up and take somebody's job next year or the year after, he's probably a 2023, 2024 guy.
Yeah. Jordan Walker is the kid's name, and now that gives you 2 pretty powerful bats down in the minors with him and Nolan Gorman sitting down there waiting to come up for the future of the Cardinals. But it's always weird for me to talk about the MLB draft because you never know when you're going to see those guys or if you're ever going to see those guys. You go back and you look at some of the farm system players that they've produced over the past few years and look at what rounds they were drafted in, and you go back and you look at some of those first round draft picks and see where they are now or maybe who they were traded for. And it really does seem like such a crapshoot, especially with the Cardinals always drafting in that second half of the first round too. They don't get those top guys that are surefire major league starters that you see some of the bad teams getting. So it's always so weird to talk about and then having to wait for those guys to come up.
Well, there's a few reasons. You touched on one, waiting late in the draft. And I think the reason the Cardinals have had success is because they've been patient, because they've been able to compete where they don't push the panic button too soon. I think that's helped. The other thing is, if you look at all the players who played little league, high school, college, minor league, less than 5% of all the players who play baseball ever put their foot in the batter's box for one at bat. So the odds are stacked against you anyway. It's going to be even more interesting now because after this year, we're going to contract the minor leagues somewhat. So there won't be as many teams. There won't be as many leagues. And that will pose a situation that we've never seen before as far as the talent pool is concerned. Will it make the talent pool better by reducing these teams? I think so. It'll be more competitive. There's no question about that. I also wonder how much more patience we'll see. And I think overall, a lot of these guys, as I mentioned, never make it anyway. You're going to have some guys that are going to slip through the cracks. And I'll give you a good example. Keith Hernandez was drafted so late is because he didn't play his senior year of high school. He was a pitcher, but he didn't play his senior year because he didn't get along with the coach. And so a lot of teams let him slip. But, obviously the Cardinals knew something about him and they took him late. But there's a few guys that slip through the cracks like that, either bad team, bad situation, injury. There's a lot of things that go into it. So, I think it's going to be interesting to watch how we develop players from this point on.
Funny you mentioned Keith Hernandez. It was on this day that he was traded to the New York Mets, and that's the topic of today's This Day in Cardinal History, which you can listen to right now on Claibs Online. We have stories from both Rick Hummel and John Rooney, along with your commentary on the day that trade was made, and that is what we talk about. And I liked going back and thinking, what was that, 1983, right? 83 was when that trade was made?
Yeah.
imagining if there was sports talk or if there were the shows that we have today, if a player the quality of Keith Hernandez was traded to a city, to a market like New York, because he wasn't getting along with the coach. And there were other issues too that many fans didn't know about at the time, that they probably would have known about if there would have been social media and if there would have been the sports coverage that there is today, and how something like that would have been covered in 2020 as opposed to how it was covered in 1983.
Completely different for sure. Remember, talk radio existed. It was talk radio, not just sports talk radio. And it was KMOX. They were the only ones that were having any success with it, and they were the flagship station of the Cardinals. It would have been different. There's no doubt. I think there would have been a different spin put on it. But as we learned later, Keith had some issues. But, yeah, it would have been quite different compared to today.
And then for him to go and have the success that he had in New York, too, having the issues that he had here in St. Louis with management, and being able to go there and get over all of that and help the Mets win a World Series, and the Cardinals too. It took them just a couple years before they won a World Series again afterwards. It just thinking back to how different things were back then is crazy. And you can listen to everything on claibsonline.com or wherever you find your podcast. It's up there right now. Each and every one of the This Day in Cardinal History is about 4 or 5 minutes long. So it's not something you have to devote an hour to like some podcasts out there. So it's just a quick listen and a nice little look back to some things that happened in Cardinal history. Before we do move on, Claibs, I just wanted to make sure we mentioned Munganass Alton Toyota, one of the sponsors here of Lunch with Claibs and Joe. It's hybrid month at Munganass Alton Toyota. You can check out the 2020 Toyota RAV4 hybrids, the Camry hybrids, the Avalon hybrids, and they have great deals on fantastic financing available through the month of June. 0% available for 60 months. So if you've been thinking about a hybrid, now is the perfect time to do it. You can visit altontoyota.com or call their sales department at 618-208-2400 and make your appointment today at Munganass Alton Toyota. Claibs, you touched on it a little bit about the testing and COVID-19, the cases rising throughout the country in some spots. So that brings us to the NBA and the NFL. The NBA and the NHL and the NFL, I guess, two different places right now. The NBA and hockey, the NHL, are in similar spots where they're waiting for that postseason to start. The NHL has a plan. The NBA has kind of thrown a plan out there. So we'll start with the NBA because the plans come out. There's a few holes in the plan as far as access to players, how they're going to do it, how they plan on keeping the players safe. And one of the biggest issues, the workers that are going to be working at these arenas are allowed to come and go from the bubble, so to speak, while the players and coaches must stay put. If the employees can come and go, why does it even matter what the players do?
Because players do something that's more important to the NBA than the employees. Because if you get one guy that's sick, that's an employee, you can replace him. Okay, you can replace him, and I'm sure they're going to have waves of people or people that will be designated that will be their job, and they'll be tested on a regular basis. Probably more than normal. But you have to do the best job you can to isolate the team from any outside issues. And I'm sure there'll be some social distancing there as well. But I certainly understand it. Look, there's not going to be a perfect plan here. And everybody's trying to come up with a perfect plan. There isn't one. I guess the only plan is don't play. And they're not going to do that. But I think when you look at how they're trying to go about it, I think they're feeling their way through it cautiously. They're trying to make sure that they get enough information. And again, we go back to this, Joe, we're learning more and more about this virus on a daily basis, on what it can do, what it doesn't do a lot of. And as you learn, you have to kind of find where you can put the peg into the hole and make sure you can plug it up. So that's one of the reasons why I think you're seeing a lot of different balls in the air right now.
Yeah, and then they also have the issue of now Kyrie Irving had held a conference call with NBA players the other day and went on to say, I don't support going into Orlando. I'm not with the systematic racism and the BS. Something smells a little fishy here. Kyrie Irving speaking for the players that he doesn't want to go, and it doesn't feel right to start the season. Dwight Howard kind of echoed the same thoughts as Kyrie Irving. LeBron James on the other side is ready to play, to which Patrick Beverley says, if LeBron plays, we all play.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. Here's my question.
Kyrie Irving, by the way, is a flat earther. And I'm just going to throw this out there that if you believe that the earth is flat, nobody should believe anything else that comes out of your mouth.
Very good point. Here's the other thing about Kyrie Irving. So you're not going to play. So you're going to sit at home and do what? What is it that's that important? And I understand you want to try and deal with racial injustice, but how does that serve what you're trying to do? If you want to draw attention to it, there's plenty of ways to do it that'll be more effective. Because when you don't work and you don't play and the game doesn't play, it not just touches the players, it touches families and of other employees, and the trickle down effect would just be too great for somebody who wants to stay at home and not play and show in his method of showing a protest. It makes no sense at all. How he even came up with it, I have no idea. And if he would say to me, I'm concerned about my health because of the COVID, yeah, you may have a point. That's why they're trying to take baby steps in addressing it. But to sit here and tell me that you sitting at home is going to help racial injustice, that's no sale. If you want to do something, write out a check, get involved. That's a better method than sitting at home and not doing anything.
And we've also seen NBA teams that have gone about it and protested and made very powerful statements, such as the Clippers a few years ago, and then many of the players wearing the T-shirts, the "I Can't Breathe" T-shirts a few years back as well. So being on the court actually gets their message out even more.
Plenty of ways to do it, and I think we're getting even more creative in getting the message out and getting people aware of what's going on in this country. I don't think Kyrie's idea is a very good one.
No, like I said, he is not. If I was an NBA player, I don't think I'd want Kyrie Irving speaking for me. If LeBron's going to go out there and say something, I think a lot more people are going to listen. And that takes.
Here's the other thing about Kyrie: he stays hurt so much, he probably is more comfortable at home.
Yeah, and that it wasn't supposed to be their year anyway, so he probably just wants the season done and move on to the next year, where he and Kevin Durant could run the show for a year in Brooklyn and see how that looks.
It won't.
The NFL, that's right now. That is so. I am so intrigued right now by what is happening or what's going to happen with the NFL, because they are not in season right now. They are the lucky. I guess the lucky sport that is not being really affected by this in any way at all. And as the pages turn, as the dates keep rolling along, we're getting closer and closer to the start of football season, the start of training camps and workouts. And we're wondering what's going to happen with that season. What's it going to look like? What's the Super Bowl going to look like? What's Florida, the state of Florida, going to be like in a few months with after summer and after a possible second wave? And we find out today that both the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys each had 2 players test positive for COVID-19. And now that's going to start sparking a lot more questions as to the safety of these players and the safety of those around them too, as one of those players is St. Louis's own Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, one of the things we have to look at here is getting information on how they may have come in contact with it. You can't run from it anymore. I mean, it's there. You have to do things to try and protect yourself. The luxury that the NFL has is they have time to throw some scenarios on the wall to see how they're going to get through this. I know they even talk about maybe having fans show up. there's just a lot to try and disseminate now with regard to how they're going to fix this and how they're going to put a season on. And I know Jim Harbaugh, or his brother, uh,
John.
John, said that these protocols are almost impossible to work with. And I think you're going to hear a lot more people talk about that in how they're going to do things. And it's going to take some getting used to unless there's a better plan, unless there's a better method of testing, unless there's an eventual vaccine. This is how it's going to be for a while. And I think, Joe, the other issue that we haven't heard a lot about is the legal ramifications that are going to come with this. Ohio State, they were very emphatic about saying the whole team signed a waiver with regard to their commitment to doing the proper things, but they also signed a waiver to make sure the university didn't get sued if one of these guys gets sick. You know, there's so many different tiers of this thing, and I think the NFL is going to be in a similar situation with their players. The legal ramifications from this have yet to be felt, but they will be. It's just a matter of time when the good lawyers can figure out the best plan of attack and how they can defend their clients. But I think we're a long ways away from actually getting people on the field and getting them in the stands like we expect them to. Because the other thing, if you're in college, school's got to be in first, right? I mean, you can't have guys come back to campus and play if you don't have classes on campus for anybody else for safety reasons. So
that kind of ruins the whole, the whole image that they try to give off as these guys being students first and athletes second, right?
yeah, you're right, and that's not going to happen. But I found it interesting that all of the players signed the waiver, and I'm just saying to myself, you mean to tell me not one guy on a 100-man squad didn't think twice about this or had their parents or their lawyer look this over to make sure that they were doing the right thing? I just think there's a lot of stuff going on here, man, that we're going to eventually learn was basically to cover their asses as far as the leagues and the universities are concerned. And I understand, I get it, but I think this is where kids need better advice. You know, they want to play so bad they don't look at the other side of this coin, and that could sometimes be fatal.
No, it's really kind of showing off that it's exposing a lot of these universities for the doublespeak that we've had over all these years about how important it is for these kids to be in class and how we have to protect them as students, and that's why we can't pay them because they're students, they're not athletes, and now you're having them sign waivers and put their health at risk, and that sounds to me a lot more like a business than it does an education.
I agree.
It's so next Monday we sit here, we're talking about baseball. What are we talking about with baseball next Monday? What's going to be going on?
We'll have a schedule by then.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. We'll have a schedule, and they'll start to put things in place. You know, there are players already here in St. Louis working out. I ran into Mike Schildt the other night and talked to him a little bit about, the fact that they're planning, they're trying to get ready. I mean, it's one of those situations that they can only do so much because they're still trying to figure this out also. So, but I'm fairly confident we'll have a schedule by next week.
I hope so. I really do. What do you have coming up planned for this week, interview-wise, on Claibs Online?
Well, we're going to talk with Doug Glanville this week, talk a little baseball with him. Doug's done a lot of things here recently. We're going to visit with David Wilhelm of Bespoke. It's a clothier here in St. Louis, and talk about things that we normally haven't been able to do, and that's wear real clothes, because we've been in shirts and shorts and everything else because nobody's been able to go anywhere. And we have a couple other people lined up. Dr. Rick is going to visit with us later this week, and we've got a couple other people that we are efforting to visit with. Let's just put it that way.
Very nice. And we're going to try to do a few more video things as well, like we did with Kevin Weeks last week, and get that available to you so you can either listen to it or watch it on our YouTube page. That's the Claibs Online YouTube page. But as just keep refreshing that podcast page wherever you listen to it, Spotify, Google, iTunes. We have everything up right there, right underneath the Claibs Online logo. and then everything is up on claibsonline.com as well. And I don't want it to become a running joke, Claibs, but I think next week we're going to try to be at Fast Eddie's, right?
We're going to be somewhere next week. We got a couple of options here, but we will be somewhere next week.
Okay. All right. I feel like this is just kind of a recurring that we keep telling people this and then we don't come through with it. But I get it. We need to we're still figuring out how to do this show from our homes. That taking it on the road is a big thing that we have to try to figure out and make sure it sounds good and the quality is good too. So next week we are going to plan on taking it out on the road, possibly Fast Eddie's, maybe somewhere else, but we're going to look for that again next Monday. Claibs, enjoy the rest of your Monday. We'll let the folks know when we plan on doing other videos or posting other videos, and we'll keep everybody up to speed on all of our social media accounts as well with all the interviews that we have coming up. Have a fantastic rest of your Monday, and I guess it's yesterday was a sad Flag Day for you, but hopefully, as you said, you're going to make a new Flag Day once the baseball season starts, correct?
We'll find a day on the calendar we can have a better idea. And also, Joe, we want to remind everybody, just check out the page as far as interviews that maybe you missed the first time around when we first did it. You'd be surprised at some of the people we've had a chance to visit with and talk to. So make sure that people and tell your friends, check it out. We got some fun stuff, and we're going to continue to have some more fun stuff coming up.
Absolutely. Claibs, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. That's Mike Claiborne. I'm Joe Roderick. We will see you next Monday. But as I said, you can always hear from us on many different pieces of content that we have on claibsonline.com.